What we're going to talk about tonight is business meetings. Now, you know what? This is something that is poorly taught in business school and certainly not taught at all or very limitedly taught within the trades. And I think that it is something that we need to focus more on. When the assessment was done on this program, like what we had to do in order to develop this program was go out to industry and ask them, what do you want to see? This was one of the things that came up as lacking amongst not only tradespeople, but students in general is how do you run an effective meeting? Because in effect, a meeting is the way that decisions are made within all businesses. So it doesn't matter if it's a trades-related businesses or a business on Bay Street in Toronto. The concepts and the processes are the same, and it represents a democratic approach to running a business. Certainly, the boss is still the boss, but normally there's more than one person who is responsible for the decision making. And the question is, how can we get more than one people? How can we build consensus amongst more than one people in order to find a decision to move forward, to move a business forward in such a way that everybody agrees? Okay. So that is the basis for which this process that we're talking about tonight was formed. We need to be able to find a way in order to A, address decisions, address problems, and B, make decisions that build consensus amongst a group that will be carried out. And then we need to make sure that they are carried out. So some sort of a feedback loop. So effectively, this is the meeting process, is decision making is what it's all about. What exactly is a business meeting? Well, a business meeting is a gathering of two or more people. So again, you got to have more than two. If you only got one manager and that's the only person, there's no need of a meeting because that manager makes all the decisions and the consequences of those decisions rides on him or her. When you have more than one person, you need to be able to come to an agreement. You need to be able to understand where the other person is coming from, and you have to be able to accept different points of view. This is the purpose of a meeting. It makes better decision making. Okay, what we're talking about here tonight applies to any format, be it a live or a virtual or any form of meeting that you can imagine. Okay, so this is kind of like a one-size-fits-all approach. The very first thing that you need in order to have an effective meeting is something called an agenda. An agenda is effectively a roadmap for the meeting. So let's assume that you're the person who initiates the meeting. Why did you have a meeting? Why did you call a meeting? Because you felt like it? Probably not. You probably had some things that you needed to run across other people, be it how to run the operation, be it how to deal with customers, be it to buy a new piece of equipment, anything like that. You're making some decision and you want some input on it. Well, let's imagine now you're not the person who starts the meeting. Let's assume that I'm the one starting a meeting and I'm calling you guys to a meeting. Okay, could you come to a meeting? You're all left in the dark wondering, what the heck are we meeting for? I don't know. Do you know? That's not helpful either. You need to be clear because you want to have an opportunity to give this concern that we're going to address some thought beforehand. So an agenda allows all of those things to happen. It clarifies what the purpose of the meeting is, and it communicates that to people out there who are going to come to the meeting, what we call the participants. So the agenda lays out specifically the details of the purpose of the meeting, why we're having the meeting, where the meeting is being held, the place, so everyone can find it, as I say, virtual or live, the date and the time that it's happening, so that way people can be there, and as well as items of business that will be discussed during the meeting. If I were to send it out to you ahead of time, you could look at it and give it some thought. That way, it's not all being thrown at you fresh in this meeting that we're having. You have given it some thought, and you can contribute to the discussion in a much more valuable way. So you've got that agenda now, and we're going to, out of the agenda, you're going to look at it and you're going to see some points, and those points are going to be one of three categories. They're going to be information items, I'm going to give you an update on the current status, for example, of our building. Okay, the current status of our building. You may not know that. Now, there's no decision to made there or anything. I'm just kind of laying the groundwork to you. So that's what's called the information items. And meetings often have information items up front. Okay, here's what's going on. That's effectively what the information item is. We also have action items. Action items are things that I asked you to do. Could you please review your production capability in the last 2 months? I want to find out if you've been affected by the size of the building. Is the size of the building constraining your ability to get the job done? Okay. Do you have enough space? And this could be considered as an action item. Before the meeting, I want you, in the action item, the agenda will clearly say it's an action item. You're going to think about it and you're going to say, well, I should check those numbers, or I should think about the last 3 months. Look back over information. So that way you can bring something to the meeting that is of use as opposed to just pure speculation. You're going to give some data at the meeting to support one course of action or another. And we're also going to have discussion or decision topics. These topics are going to be asking you to say, I want your input into that. Here's a typical meeting. This is our council agenda. First of all, the first item was a call to order. And then the minutes from the previous meeting were read out. Items, business arising. There were no business arising last night. This is a standard agenda that we have for council meetings. Information items. You can see that we had something from the Canadian Mental Health Association, the Claremont High graduation coming up. If there was any new business items, there was nothing new that we had. And a new business item is defined as something we haven't discussed before. As opposed to a business arising, which is we've discussed it in a previous meeting and we got to bring it back for a discussion or something to fill out the discussion based on something we've already discussed. And in our council here, we have committees. So we have basically 3 committees, and those committees have a meeting and they're going to report to the main meeting from their meeting. So this is an opportunity for the committee. So the committee reports are laid out there, and then there's the adjournment. So this is, say, for example, a typical meeting agenda for a town council. What you're going to find in most businesses is once you've formatted an agenda, you should be able to use that same agenda again and again and again. Now, you're going to put detail in the agenda for every different meeting, but the basic format of our town council meeting is the same every time. Now that you've seen an agenda and you know what the basic agenda is for, you need to know how to prepare an agenda. And there's lots of formats for an agenda. I've shown you a couple. They can go from a very formal arrangement, such as the town, to a less formal arrangement, such as a small business. But the critical thing is they list down the points that are going to be discussed and the things that we need to decide on. So here's some suggestions for formatting an agenda. And this is a nice little way to do an agenda, what I have here. And the reason I like this is because it saves some trouble. Because from the agenda, so let's say, for example, in this red column here, I have the company name and a meeting type, location, date, time, meeting purpose, attendees. You should always record who was at the meeting. And you're going to see, here are the topics: call to order, approval agenda, minutes from last meeting, item 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, and the adjournment. That's very similar to what the town offered up, okay? When you create an agenda, this type of a matrix that I have here allows you to capture information as the meeting goes. First of all, you can allot how much time you want to discuss those topics. And again, for purposes of timing your meeting. And if you send out the times on that, people will know how long they got to talk about something. So instead of it dragging on and on and on, it can be expedited by putting times in it. A description of the purpose, a little descriptor of something, for people who aren't too familiar, is often important. And the last column, when the meeting takes place, you're going to record what are the actions you're going to do and who's responsible for doing it. What this type of arrangement will allow you to do is to create something called minutes. Now, minutes are the record of the meeting. And if you take the agenda and you add on that extra part, it allows you to create minutes almost instantaneously, because you'll know what was discussed, and what the decision was arising from that discussion. So this type of matrix arrangement you could do in 1 or 2 pages. I mean, you might need a little bit more space. I've got it kind of condensed here, but if you do up something like this, it allows you to use it as an agenda, but also use it to create your minutes. Roles in a meeting. Let's talk about that for a few minutes. There are effectively 3 roles in a meeting, okay? The first 2 are individuals. The last role is assumed by everyone who's in the meeting. The chairperson is the most important role in the meeting. The chairperson is a person who is ultimately responsible for the meeting, hence the name chairperson. That chairperson's job is to A, create the agenda, but also to run the meeting, okay? Run the meeting and ensure that the meeting flows to do what the meeting was designed to do. So if the meeting is designed to reach decisions on things, well, the chairperson's job is to make sure it reaches those decisions in a timely fashion. According to the agenda, we're supposed to take an hour to do this. We need to do this in an hour. That's the chairperson's basic role, okay? There's a lot more things the chairperson does, but effectively we said, what is it, the crux of the chairperson's role? The chairperson's designed to make that meeting flow and achieve its ultimate objective. So the chairperson's job is not an easy job. And usually the owner of the company would be a chairperson or the head of the department or something like that. But in a nonprofit meeting or something like that, usually the chairperson is an elected person. And that person, as I say, bears a good bit of responsibility. That chairperson's job is to A, create the agenda, but also to run the meeting, okay? Run the meeting and ensure that the meeting flows to do what the meeting was designed to do. So the chairperson has a very key role. The chairperson is really the meeting manager. And prior to the meeting, the person has to basically build the agenda and get that agenda out to everyone. That person often would be responsible for selecting a recorder. So as I say, that person could ask someone one of the participants, could you please record? And it's nice to give them a heads up before they come to the meeting and say, I'm going to ask you to record. And in the inviting of the participants, getting that information out is normally done through email now, but sometimes it could be a letter, sometimes it could be a phone call. But again, chair is ultimately responsible for doing that. Could delegate it to the recorder, but oftentimes the chair is the person who does that sort of stuff. At the meeting, the chair sits normally at the head of the table. Everybody should be able to see the chair. That chair then sits there with a lot of responsibility on their heads. They got to watch the time. They got to make sure the agenda is followed. They got to make sure that the decisions are made, and they're made in a good way. Now, sometimes you can have a lot of strife in meeting. Well, the chair's job is to minimize that strife and look for consensus. Meetings can go out of order very quickly unless there is some agreed upon rules, like how long a person can talk, or if they want to change something. We have something called Robert's Rules of Order, which it is a system that is used in order to manage meetings. Now, in a very formal meeting, Robert's Rules of Order are used all the time. But you can also create your own rules of order as long as everybody is aware of them and everyone agrees to them, okay? So at the beginning of the meeting, you can say, okay, everyone's going to have one opportunity to speak. They can't speak for any more than 2 minutes on a subject. These sorts of things, if that is laid out up front, that should make the meeting move swiftly. And again, chair's job is to do that sort of thing. Another important thing that chair has to do is to make sure there's something called a quorum. Now, a quorum is usually 50% plus 1 in most meetings. Like, organizations often have constitutions, and constitutions are the basic rules of how the organization operates. In a constitution, it will normally say what a quorum is. It may be less than 50% plus 1. It doesn't really matter. As long as the organization has dictated what a quorum is, to be able to make a legitimate decision. You got a quorum. This is an official meeting. The decisions of this official meeting are binding on the company. For larger organizations, this gets more important. But for small organizations, if you run into a debate, was this a legitimate decision? If we have it clearly laid out what a quorum is, and if the chair ensures that quorum is met, then it certainly helps, legitimize decisions that are being made. The chair also calls the meeting to order and make sure it starts on time. The idea is, again, timeless, and valuing people's time is very important. Maintains order. That could include, having a gavel. Sometimes you hear a little hammer or something to ensure that the meeting and the members of the meeting don't dive into chaos. Explains questions of procedure. And again, we recognize that there are rules of order in a meeting that can be either Robert's Rules of Order or decided by the group. And that person is the arbitrator of those decisions and the processes. Announces and clarifies all business under consideration. The chair would say to everyone, this is why we're talking about this. Here's some background on it. So basically, the chair just describes it so that we have a clear understanding of what we're talking about. That's the chair's job. So again, the chair has to do his or her homework up front to understand what we're talking about. States motions. Motions are formal processes that allows a vote to be made, and they have to be positive motions, meaning that I want this meeting to do something. So we agreed to build a new building, okay? And that's the motion, and there will be a vote amongst the members of the meeting, and if a majority votes in favor of it, then it's agreed to. The chair's job is to make sure that everyone has an opportunity for input and that it's fair. So again, the chair has to be aware of who wants to speak on something and tell them how long you can do it. Again, the chair has to be on top of the meeting. That conducts the voting. As I say, call a vote amongst a group of members. That's one way to settle an issue, is to vote on it. Okay, if we feel we've talked about it enough, let's vote on it. If the majority votes in favor of it, majority wins. And the chair announces the voting results. And again, so we can't overstress the value of the chair in a meeting. We also have another very important role, and that is the role of a recorder. The recorder is the person who takes notes. Effectively, whenever we talk at a meeting, it's very difficult for a chairperson to take the notes as well. So it happens sometimes if you got a small group of 2 or 3 people. You don't have all of these roles, but effectively the chairperson's job and the recorder's job hopefully is separated. The recorder needs to be able to record. The chairperson needs to be able to make sure that the meeting is keeping on track and that it makes those decisions. The other key role is made up by all the rest of the people who show up in the meeting, including the chairperson, including the recorder. These people are considered as participants. Now, the recorder, it depends, depends on how formal the meeting is. Someone can be appointed as a recorder. One of the participants can be appointed as a recorder. Okay, you are going to take the notes to the meeting. Great. Okay, great. Now, in a more formal meeting, we can have a recorder in there who's not really involved in the meeting, just recording it. Okay, so sometimes in a more formal setting, it will be like the office secretary or something like that would do the recording and would not have any impact into the decision making. But as I say, depending on how the meeting is made up, that can change. The participant is everyone else, and the participant has an important role because the participant is the one who's in the meeting who can bring his or her thoughts to bear on the decision making. And if you're there in the meeting, there's a reason you're there. So your job as a participant is to contribute and to help make the better decisions because of that, by bringing your experience, your thoughts, your insights, and any of your experiences into the mix. We also have another very important role, and that is the role of a recorder. The recorder is the person who takes notes. The recorder effectively makes sure the meeting and decisions that the meeting makes are documented. So the recorders don't need to participate in the meeting. As I said, in a formal meeting where a separate recorder comes in, do not participate. However, you can have a member sub in, one of the participants, be a recorder as well. But their job, regardless, is to quickly and accurately capture the key points of the meeting. And this is for the purposes of the minutes. The key points. You don't want to write down every word. Johnny said or Phil said. You want to say, there was a discussion on, and based on the discussion, here was the consensus, or here was the basic gist of what we agreed to. So once the meeting is completed, the recorder and chair will work together to ensure that the draft meeting minutes are distributed to the attendees. So everything goes out, and it should happen on a timely basis, not in the next meeting, okay? It's no point to give the minutes of the previous meeting in the next meeting, particularly if there's a month between the meetings, because the idea is that a meeting is going to decide that, okay, Paul, you're going to be responsible between the meetings now, you're going to be responsible for doing this. If Paul doesn't see he was responsible or be reminded that he was responsible for doing this between the meetings, the next meeting comes along and someone's going to say, well, Paul, did you do it? No, I didn't know I was supposed to do it. So these are the things. So it's helpful to get the minutes out almost immediately after the meeting and to clearly state, you're responsible for doing this, Paul, and next meeting then I can report on it. So again, this type of matrix format that I showed you a little bit ago is very useful at clearly defining who's responsible, when it needs to be done, so that way we can say in the next meeting, yes, we've got that issue resolved, and not constantly be coming back to it. The third role, as I say, is the participants. So the participants work to support every other meeting role. Participants need to know what's going on, come prepared to have an educated discussion in the meeting. It's the participants' job not only to come to the meeting prepared, but to work with others and listen, brainstorm ideas, discuss options, propose solutions during the meeting. And the participants, too, can also be tasked with completing assigned tasks between the meetings. So, okay, Paul, you're going to be responsible for doing this. Report back to us next meeting on this. So the next section is, what are some basic rules for running an effective meeting? And as I say, meetings are something that are not well taught. So these rules are very good at helping people understand what is it we should be doing in order to make meetings more effective and not be wasting people's time. Well, getting a meeting off to a good start is key to running an effective meeting. So the chair should warm things up by greetings and introductions. You know, the chair kind of a little bit of small talk up front, not too long, but just to get people warmed up. Next, the chair should review the meeting's purpose, agenda, expected outcomes, and product. Everyone's clear on why we're here. Moving into the core purpose of the meeting, the chair should, 1, review the corrective necessary and approve the minutes of the prior meeting. Again, we review the prior meeting. Paul, in the last meeting, you said you're going to do this. Okay, let's assume that everything that Paul agreed to do is done. Let's assume the decisions we made are clearly stated in these minutes. So basically, the participants get a chance to review the minutes here and make any changes to them and prepare to comment on their actions or what they discovered between meetings. Provide appropriate departmental and company information to the team needs. Review progress and action items, action plans, and commitments. Discuss and make decisions about agenda items in the meeting. That's something that is certainly important, is to be able to chat about, you know, what is it we're talking about? What is the decision we're bringing based on that discussion? And identify next steps. What are we going to do next? What is the next thing? To be able to think strategically. Identify the purpose, outcome, and the agenda for the next meeting. So this current meeting is going to help us define what the agenda is for next meeting. At the end of the meeting, note taker should review the comments made by people during the meeting. Sometimes that happens in meetings, not all the time, but people do a summary. Either a note taker or the chair does a summary of what was discussed in the meeting, and just make sure everything's clear. Identifying the assistance needed from people not in the group, and assign participants to make contact. Okay, can we get information from Jane, who's over in the other division? Jane could fill us in. Paul, could you call Jane tomorrow? Yes, I will do that. Determine who outside the meeting participants need to know and decide how you will accomplish the communication. Again, same sort of thing. And once complete, adjourn the meeting. And hopefully the meeting is adjourned on time. So effective meetings, as I say, involve those processes. All of the things we've looked at so far, I'm going to say, are pretty mechanical. Here is the process. Here's an agenda. Follow this process. Make sure people are invited. Get the right people. Discuss. All that's pretty mechanical. Okay? The hardest part in the meeting, though, is the people issue. And the people issue will challenge you all the time. If you've got a bunch of people around the table, how do you bring them to one decision that everybody agrees on? Okay? That's not always easy. Sometimes it's quite easy, But on contentious issues in particular, it's very difficult to get people to agree on things. One of the jobs of the chair is to try to do that. And this is called consensus building. A chair needs to have a good handle on appreciating everyone's point of view, consolidating it, making adjustments to accommodate people, hearing what people say and building on decisions based on that, making slight changes. And that helps build consensus and gets everyone to agree. And while consensus building takes time, at least it develops solutions that help, particularly if it ever were to go to court. Okay? So make sure when you build an agenda, if you have a discussion, if you know you're going to have a discussion that's going to be controversial, build enough time in so that you can work towards consensus. So what are some of the ways that you can build consensus? Well, here are some of the basic recommendations you will find by experts in this. Keep a focus on the goal. Why are we in this meeting? What is the problem we're here to solve? Let's focus on that. Sometimes meetings can get so distracted. The chair's job, keep the focus on the problem. Actively listen to people and seek clarification on their points. Hear people out, appreciate their perspective, and listen intently to what they're saying, why they're saying it, how they're saying it, and be able to address their concerns. Focus on solutions, and solutions that work for everyone, okay? Let's not be problem focused, let's be solution focused. What can we do to make this work? Be honest and clear. Express your concerns up front, but respectfully. Don't let emotion get in the way of things. And appreciate that there's going to be disagreement, particularly in controversial decisions. And don't be afraid of it. Just don't take things purposely, frame disagreements as various perspectives that people bring on things. That's why you got multiple people in the meeting, really, is they have those various perspectives. And from that, try to reach a better solution. So again, be flexible in the decision making to appreciate other people's points of view. In the course content, I've got this, I call it flow diagram here with regards to exactly the same thing I just discussed, which is the building consensus. So again, step 1, introduce and clarify the issue. 2, explore the issue and look for ideas. And again, look for people to get involved. Look for emerging proposals. So out of all those ideas, someone might have a really good idea of how to proceed. That is what we call our emerging proposal, something no one's thought of before. Discuss, clarify, and amend proposal. And again, this is where you can kind of, chisel it out, make it a little bit better, massage it a bit, particularly taking into consideration other people's concerns, and test for an agreement. Okay, can everyone agree on this now? And then implement the decision. So that is the typical pattern that consensus building follows. So that really is the crux of this particular topic. And the idea is to have a good sense on business meetings and to be able to use them effectively. And I just can't overstress the fact that, if you have a good handle on how to run an effective meeting and some of the tools towards an effective meeting, it will help decision-making in your organization and lead to better results.